and I put it through AI text detectors. I put them through six of them. Off the top of my head, 4 of the text detectors said with 100% certainty this text was AI generated.
My friends, you are never going to believe who I brought to the library today. This is Dr. Kyle Beshear. He has a new book coming out, but that's not why he's here today. Actually, I brought you to the library the second I saw your amazing article that looks at the sacred records, our topic of this month. And you take on some stuff that I haven't gotten to yet, and you take it on masterfully. So,
Thank you.
Dr. Kyle Beshear, tell us who you are and tell me about this new book.
Yeah, well, my name's Kyle Beshear, as Chris said, Dr. Blythe said. And I come from Mobile, Alabama, where I pastor a church. I'm really interested in Latter-day Saint history. That's what I did my dissertation on, was James Strang's church. And I've recently written an introductory volume from a traditional Christian perspective on history, faith, and practices of the Latter-day Saint tradition. So it's called 40 Questions About Mormonism. It's meant to be used in, I'm sorry, they wouldn't let me change that.
I'll forgive you.
I pitched 40 questions about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but they couldn't fit it on the...
I gotcha. That makes sense.
But it's meant to be an introductory volume for like our students training for ministry or learning about it in the church. And
Nice.
I wanted it to be a more ironic and charitable approach to that conversation.
Cool.
So, but that's not why.
Yeah, that's not why we're here, but you might as well get a plug in. I really
Thanks, man.
appreciate it.
There it is.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So, this last week, you dropped an essay, which I think is kind of a game changer on how we think about the sacred records. Remember, the sacred records are David Miga's, my understanding.
Mm-hmm.
David Miga is allegedly receiving a series of different scriptural works, sometimes called scriptural works, usually called scriptural works, sometimes just called records. As if they're historical mythologies or wisdom being passed from, but they're allegedly passed from different communities to him as a sort of hub. That's then taken to a certain individual. We can talk about this a little later, but it's passed to a certain individual who sets it up to be formatted and revised for their app called Sacred Records, and then I can subscribe for $10 a month to get access to those records. Now, you're looking at that final product, and tell me about it. Where'd you hear of this, and what was your assessment?
I mean, I heard about it through you, and then a mutual friend of ours, Stephen Pinecker, was covering this story, and we were talking offline, and I'll be honest, I wasn't like super interested in any of this at first. Until I heard that the records were accessible kind of behind a paywall, and the claims that were being made about their antiquity and their status as scripture is very interesting to me. So I want to take a look at those. And the ones that really caught my attention was a document called the Sermon of Yahuah, which sounds like an indigenized, is that a word, indigenized? I'm not sure.
I think we could.
Indigitized version of the Tetragrammaton, which is the Hebrew holy name of God, Yahweh, or Yehovah, or Jehovah. I'm a preacher, so I see sermon of God. That's kind of interesting. So
Sure.
I want to read that one. But the most incredible claim that I've heard was the records of Merunhi, or kind of a deviation of Merunhi. I heard him talk about that in an interview with Steve. And so I wanted to check those out too. So I'm reading them, and unfortunately in the first couple of minutes, I just wasn't convinced they were actually ancient, and it kind of felt more modern.
All right. You're coming to this determination almost from the get-go.
It's pretty quick.
What was ringing off bells for you?
Yeah, there's kind of like a 30,000 foot view that you could take, or kind of the particulars. What do you want to talk about first?
from the big view is we're having so much material dropped so quickly.
Thousands of
AI
documents.
just shows up.
There it
This
is.
never happens before.
Yeah.
Why would I not think AI would be part of that? If
Yeah.
I had a student that all of a sudden gave me a 500-page book, I would think, you started this a month ago? How does this work?
And here it is. Yeah. So that's suspicious, right? So we don't want to accuse anybody of generating text from AI. Maybe it's, let's benefit of the doubt, revised by AI or.
Sure, yeah.
So my question was, if there's a relationship between these texts and AI, like what would it be? And the reason that I came to that kind of curiosity was because of the language itself in the Sermon of Yahuah didn't come across as ancient to me. So if you read like a modern translation of, say, the New Testament, like the New International Version, it always, no matter how hard they try to make it contemporary English, you still feel that kind of like text of antiquity. Like the language functions really different below, and this is the best I can do in the modern English.
Yeah.
It just didn't feel like that. So that was the first thing. I'm a preacher, and so I read the Bible in different translations a lot, and I just didn't get that sense first. So maybe like a spidey sense or something.
Sure.
Then in the Sermon of Yahuah in specific is really interesting because it appears to be either riffing off of or echoing two really famous episodes surrounding Jesus Christ that most of your viewers are probably going to be familiar with, which is the Sermon on the Mount, the beginning of the Gospel of Matthew, and then Jesus' sermon in 3rd Nephi. And it kind of follows that
Sermon at the temple.
the Sermon at the Temple, right? It kind of follows that setting where there's a strong divine figure that teaches to a very still and receptive people, and then that divine figure kind of like exits. There's not a lot of activity from the audience. It's a reception thing, right?
Yeah.
I'm admittedly far less familiar with the Sermon on the Temple as I am with the Sermon on the Mount, but the similarities were really interesting to me because in the Sermon on the Mount, you have a people that are receptive and they're just kind of listening, and Jesus is very clearly the main character, and it's very clearly a kind of a compression of his teachings into this one sermon. Right? It's kind of the same thing with the Sermon of Yahuah, except you have scene setting as well. And the scene setting has elements to it that really invites the reader to imagine in their head what we, 21st century Westerners, would have imagined a first century indigenous scene of teaching would be like.
All right, give me an example. That's
Okay, so the scene is set by a waterfall that's called the Great Falls. And so the narrator describes this really cinematic moment where the people are paying attention, but there's mist hitting their face, and they're warmed by fires, right? And the Yahuah figure at one point kind of like reignites the embers and then uses that as a metaphor in his teaching. There are children, there are, I think, warriors. People are bowed and they're reverent and they're silent. They don't say a word. And it just comes across to me as like how an American in the 21st century would try to describe a scene of indigenous people
You
centuries
use
ago.
the word noble savage.
Noble savage. Yeah, that's a technical, academic, or scholarly term that, and maybe you can correct me because I think it's as early as the 18th century. We see this beginning of depiction of indigenous people as romanticized,
Oh, yeah.
of being attuned, being spiritually enlightened, calm, humble, aware of their surroundings. So where like Europeans are like chaotic and complex, and we are overtaking nature, the noble savage is noble because they're in tune with nature. Maybe there's something we can learn from them, right? So Pocahontas, for example, would be, and even the cartoon. What's the song?
Paint with the colors of the wind.
Paint with the colors of the wind, right? You may know all of these things, but you don't know what I know. So walk
You
a
don't
mile
know
in my
that
shoes.
bear is our brother.
Yes.
So, you know, right? if we were to look out this building, we would see a peak that used to be called Squaw Peak, and now they've renamed it. And I don't know what the new name's called, but you're supposed to imagine, you know, an Indian princess standing on this peak with her hair, you know, blowing back as leaves fall upon her. And that's the exact scene you get in Pocahontas, right?
Oh, yeah.
The idea of the Indian princess standing above the waterfall it's cinematic. It looks cool, and something similar is happening here.
That was the vibe I was picking up. And the Sermon of Yahuah was really, really short. So, well, let me ask this then, because here's two white men. How can we contextualize our own conversation?
Yeah, this is something this series is going to do, right? So this is starting out with talks with Sherry Cardinal, who has her own wrestle with her indigenousness. At the end of this month, I'm going to attend a conference on self-indigenization, which is about the pretendian phenomena. I'm going to interview several native scholars and kind of wrestle with this idea. There's something really vulnerable to comment on such a emotionally charged topic like this, right? But one thing's for sure, people all the way back from Vine Deloria, you've read God is Red, maybe?
I have not, no.
You know, really important theological work that from the beginning says, like, there's great things in native culture. There's a lot we can learn. And you have environmentalism, or how we relate to the land, is part of it. But his concern was that there's going to be such a stereotype of natives dealing with native spirituality that the young indigenous person growing up in those times won't be able to sort out what's actually traditional and what's stereotypical. And so it's a concern that way. So yeah, I just did an interview with a wonderful friend and thinker, Elias Gold, he runs the channel Native Media Theory, Latter-day Saint guy. And we talk about just the stereotypes that go along with natives in the media. And so this is the question. If we are racist in our conversation, we don't mean to be.
No, that's not the intention.
We would love to be learning about this. But I think we're in safe ground making our assessments on this, as long as we're willing to hear feedback.
100%.
That's how I feel.
Yeah. Well, I echo that. Yeah, so that was one text. The other one was the records of Merunhi. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's spelled Merunhi. And the way I've been remembering it is Merunhi. Now that, if you're a Latter-day Saint, is interesting, because it sounds like somebody
Moroni, right?
I'd be familiar with Moroni. Yeah. And what's interesting about the records of Merunhi or Moroni is that they both involve the decline of a civilization, the presence of plates, and the importance of those records bearing a testimony that's kind of backwards facing of what's already occurred, and forward facing, like the promise of God is yet to come. And then it ends in a dramatic burying or interment of the records. So that's interesting to me, because you have that in the Book of Mormon and you have that in the records of Moroni, but guess where else we have this kind of a story?
I know where you're going. Tell us about it.
Let's go straight there to Voree, Wisconsin, September 1845.
Yes.
People hear for the first time a translation of the records of Voree, which were discovered by James Strang on the Hill of Promise by 4 men who excavated the site under the supervision, but not the participation, of James Strang. And these plates were really small, and on them were etchings. And Strang, who then was a contender to be the prophet of the church after Joseph Smith was assassinated that summer, or the summer before, 2 summers before, James, in a bid to try to convince people that he was a prophet, seer, translator, translates these plates, and it is of a man named, well, not a man, it's title Raja, so ruler, chief, Raja Manchu of Varito. And he tells about a civilizational decline, records these plates, makes a prophecy that like God's going to do something amazing here, and then buries them as well. So for me, if I'm looking at the Book of Mormon, and then I'm looking at the Voree records, and then I'm looking at the records of Merunhi and the Sacred Records app, that's a three-peat of the same episode.
Yeah, it feels like an adaptation.
Over and over, yeah. So I don't quite know what to make of it, but I thought that was interesting, and that's why I wanted to read those records. Like, is this giving us additional information? Is it like an appendix to Moroni's records at the end of the Book of Mormon? So I read them, and I start to have the same feelings about the records of Moroni as I did with the Sermon of Yahuah. But this time it's a little bit different because I start to discern and see patterns that are pretty familiar to any trained eye that has been trained to see tells of artificial intelligence, specifically large language models. So ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, they're all trained on different models. And so they produce slightly different works, but after a while, they all start to give the same tells, right?
Yeah, they're based on this huge group of data, so they should be similar.
Right, and what they're trying to reproduce is us. And so what they learn is what are the writing styles that we like, and then that's kind of how they reproduce the language, right? So what we like and what they have access to, they being the LLMs, is anything that we've uploaded digitally to the internet over the past 50 or 60 or 70 years or whatever it's been, right? Yeah. So it's really only learned how to speak in modern English, and I do mean modern, within our lifetimes. Right. So we would expect if a text is ancient, it would kind of cut against that grain, and we don't see that. And we could talk about the specifics of why that is. But before I did that, I went ahead and I took just the Sermon of Yahuah and I put it through AI text detectors. I put them through six of them. And off the top of my head, 4 of the text detectors said with 100% certainty, this text was AI generated.
Of course.
Another one said, 95, 94%. And then the last one was 86 or so percent. So it comes out to be an average of like 95% certainty. This was AI generated or AI revised. And I don't know if you've played with these before.
Sure.
I put my writing in it because I want to know, would I ever be accused of it? And it's not 100%. Like I put some stuff that I wrote in like some of my best grad school writing before ChatGPT was ever a thing. And I'll put it in AI text detector, and it's like, I think about 30% certain this was AI generated.
Yeah. Because they're picking up on all the quotes you might have.
Quotes, it's well organized, it's well structured, it's polished. But 6 generators or 6 detectors all saying, hey, we're pretty certain this is not humor.
As a professor, I hate sitting down with a student who I think is plagiarized, right? And I consider AI use at this level plagiarism. And so when I sit down with someone, I want to make sure I really am certain, right? Because it's awkward. And a lot of students will sit there and pretend like they have no idea what you're talking about. If I had 100%, I'd feel completely confident to sit down with a student, right? I wouldn't have any sort of like inkling of, oh no.
Well,
is there a supernatural angle to this someone could claim? Maybe, right?
That's the point.
What's interesting about this, right, is that David Taylor, the way these records are getting to us, AI could have been put into them before he got them.
So he has like no clue.
Like he has no clue, it sounds like, right? He's receiving these sent to him from people that allege that they are traditional writings kept within their communities. Mm-hmm. He's receiving this to an email, and then he's taking those writings and somehow they get to this app. I told you I had a phone conversation with someone I'd heard worked for David Taylor. I don't want to say their name. I knew this person was in charge of formatting the material. In fact, I heard he was in charge of revising it. But I made sure not to use that language. I made sure to say, I heard you were formatting it. And so I want to know more about what's that process like. And so he told me the experience of getting these records from David. And eventually David wanted them pushed through so quickly that he had to resign. Like he said, this is just too much to get the guy resigned.
Like, okay.
But he said to me, initially I said, maybe he volunteered that he had, or maybe I asked, like, do you think this is AI? And he said, oh, absolutely not. You know, I know David, this wouldn't be AI. And if it is AI, then it would have come at this earlier stage. And I said, oh, okay. But then he said, you know, we've done our own AI checks and they all don't show AI.
Came up clean.
And I said, well, you know, we have our AI checks. And then I walked him through just the idea that all of these records translated by different people, presumably not Latter-day Saints reading the Book of Mormon. You know, these are presented as non-Christian writings. And all of them use, and thus it came to pass, right? This classic thing shows up in the King James Version, but really shows up in an accelerated version in the Book of Mormon. And for some reason, all of these different cultures translating these different ways by different translators are all coming up with that same phrase. Then this individual confiding in me said to me, well, you know, I do put them through AI, and there was some lists of things that David wanted put in there, and one of them was to make them sound more like the Book of Mormon. I said, that's a little bit different than what you just told me a second ago. There was an acknowledgement that AI came in at this other side. Now, David Taylor didn't say this, so I don't know what his position is, but this employee of his acknowledged that there was AI on that front of it. Now,
It's like part of the process.
yeah, it's part of the process to format and revise them before they can be put in the sacred records. Now, the narrative itself, you found a piece in the narrative of the Merunhi adaptation that's a little more blatant.
Yeah, it's just fascinating. So if we read the records of Moroni, you could tell pretty much from straight away, like, things are starting to wrap up.
Yeah.
If by the end of these collections, and 7 or 8 chapters, I don't recall off the top of my head, if at the end of this, there's not like the end, I'd be surprised. It's just how that feels in the narrative. And Merunhi, this character is almost frantically attempting to ensure the records that God has commanded him to, you know, record, he would get that job done. The problem is there's destruction, there's decay all around him. He's lugging around these plates. He's walking for miles and miles and miles in the direction north. He sees people. He feels compelled to stop. At one point, I feel like he almost dies. And then like God's spirit revives him and is like, you've got to do this because people need to know this message. At the end, he presses, whatever the stylus is, I don't know what the tool is, but he presses this as he's writing in these plates. And then it's very dramatic, very cinematic. He takes the records that he's compiled, he puts them into the earth. The record says that earth covers the records like a secret being kept for love's sake. And it's really dramatic. But I had to read it twice because, you know, wind it back, take the records out. He wrote that on the records that were being interned. So how does Moroni record the interment of the records after they've been buried? So I likened it to something like, you know, there I lie, dying, and with my last breath, I prayed, my wife kissed me on my forehead, my spirit left me, I died, she prayed a blessing over me and walked out of the room. At some point, the pen has to be set down because I'm dead. So you got a couple options there, obviously. Maybe this portion of the plates was written as an addendum somewhere else, but then that just kind of like pushes the problem down a couple of blocks. Well, where are those records and how did they get into this collection? But that was probably the most peculiar thing I I found in that text. The other peculiar things were like anachronisms. Moroni had a candle in the first century, in the first century Americas. He was aware of punctuation in text.
He was?
Yes. Yes, because he uses punctuation as a metaphor.
Oh.
Like something was as stopped as punctuation, which I thought was really impressive because if you go back to ancient texts, they don't have punctuation.
Does he say the word punctuation?
Punctuation.
Okay.
So for like a 21st century essayist, for first century indigenous person, I don't know how you understood what punctuation was, let alone you were able to understand punctuation so well that you would use it as a metaphor. I wasn't getting the antiquity feels that I get from like reading the Hebrew Bible or New Testament or Quran.
You know, one of the things that I think we have to acknowledge is that this could be, I mean, I think it's fairly safe to assume with your examples, at least in these two items, that there's some AI going on. I think that's pretty standard. Where it's going in, is it this sort of well-meaning employee who's supposed to put in these final touches? That could be one answer.
Right.
Is it, but then I asked him, I said, hey, I want to see the originals so I can compare them, which I think is a reasonable request if we're being told this isn't AI, but there is a recognition that certain AI refinements are put onto it. Well, hey, I want that original thing. You know, your man Strang made such a big deal that this is, tell him about this.
This is wild. So this is wild. So James Strang was a lawyer, and he, I'll just put all the cards on the table. I don't think the Voree records were authentic. Heard it here first in the library. Here's what people get wrong about James Strang. They think he's a dumb huckster. No, he was incredibly intelligent, and he was a lawyer by trade. And so I think he knew if he had records that he was going to translate to prove that he was a prophet, seer, and revelator, he better have the actual records. And not only had he better have them, but he better have a language on them that you could back translate. So if he was ever taken to court for whatever reason, he would be able to translate the language to English and show this is actually an authentic language. He went full J.R.R. Tolkien on this. He created an entire language for these little tiny plates in something like 36 to 38 words of English. It took him probably 6 to 9 months. And the reason we know this is because there's been some scholarship done by a great LDS scholar named John Hamer. He wrote a paper and proved that you could back translate the text. And then I've done a little bit of work on it too. There were some parts that John suspected were there but couldn't find it. And then I found the back translation for it. He did most of the work and I came and did a little cleanup.
Cool.
So we know that James created a language just for this hoax. And then on top of that, what he would do is people would say, well, I want to see the plates. And he would pull them out of his pocket and he would show them to you. Anybody that wanted to. I think hundreds of people saw the plates. I think that's beyond dispute. They were either on his person or they were in his effects and he will go get them and show them to you. So it's not an unreasonable request. Like you're saying, so like, let's see the transmission history here to put my anxieties about the possibility of AI revision at ease.
This is so big. So he's doing this. He's showing the evidence. He's also, in the published form, writing the actual number of words in each
Very
verse.
Interesting. So
when
you
he
can't
got the book of the Lord.
Yeah, years later.
I mean, so that's saying I don't want any changes made to this. The actual wording matters so much here. And of course, Latter-day Saints believe the Bible has had plain and precious truths revealed. And so we think text can be corrupted. So why wouldn't we be interested in the full process?
Removed.
What did I say?
We said plain and precious truths revealed.
Oh, revealed. Yeah,
So
removed is what I meant. Yeah, absolutely removed.
I didn't want people to think that my evangelicalism was like rubbing off.
No, sir. No, sir. Although I do love the Bible, and it does have precious truths that's revealed within it. But, you know, we're questioning text. So I think there could be a problem with the revision process.
Okay.
All right, we can take it there. But it's also possible that the people sending this to Midiga are actually trying to make a fool of him.
So possibly, here's my problem with that.
Okay.
And this could be nothing, but I went back and I listened to an interview with Midiga and another guy who's helping him, like kind of the guy that does the background work for the app.
This is Brian Nettles. Yeah.
Yes, Brian Nettles. And there was a line really early in the interview. It was like 5 to 8 minute mark out of like 50 or some minutes or whatever. And he remarked, he was just in awe of like the amount of texts that were coming to him, but not just the amount, but the quality of it. And he said something to the effect, you have to go back and fact check me. He said something to the effect of like, these came to us in English all ready to go. So what my concern is like, I don't understand the process well enough to know like where the AI revisions could come in. Is it at the beginning of the process, or is it immediately preceding the developer who puts it on the app? Because it's all ready to go. Like for him, it's like,
according
it's
to my
polished.
guy, it comes right there, right? And he's the one that does it, and he sends it to Brian.
So who's the guy that sends it to Brian that sends it to the app?
This is a man in Missouri who we'll talk about. Midiga shares it with him, who gives, and then he gives it to Brian. Now this over here is potential, like, because they say it comes to these email addresses already translated, right? And then so that's English.
Common email address.
It's a common email address, yeah. And then this is passed along to this individual in Missouri who does the, according to him, a little revision work, and then that goes on there. But we're not allowed to see what revisions are going on there. But how did they get to the email address? And that's the question. Now, the reasonable suggestion is these are coming from David Taylor's computer. We don't know that. That's one possibility. Another possibility is there's really all these tribes out there that just happen to have seen his call. And even though, as we'll find out, David Taylor's not a well-known name in indigenous communities, but if we assume that they've heard word somehow through his contacts, they've sent this. But another is there's just a couple or one person that's playing with them a bit, right? We're not seeing the return addresses on this. We don't have the stories where they come out. I want to show you a book of scripture that was revealed to another member of the Red Bear Pembina clan. That is the same family as David Midiga. This is a person named Madison Moore. And it was available. No.
Like a physical thing?
This is a physical thing. It was available for a very short time, called the Book of Yeshua. And as we'll see in a later episode, when David Midiga first learned of this, he actually initially said, don't pay any attention. And then for a moment, he said, there could be something to that. We'll show the evidence. We'll show the receipts on that. And then eventually said, and he said, this family member of mine could have, it's a family member, yeah, could have a scroll that I didn't know about. Now, brother, if I had scrolls passed down through a large trajectory of my family, my brother would know. Right. So if my brother had it, I think I would know too, right? If my cousins had it, chances are I would know. This is closer than cousins. I want you to check this out. Read to us from the story of how this came about. I've shown you this book just briefly before. I want you to talk to me about the Book of Yeshua. We can see this is a nice, standard print on demand.
Yeah, for Yeshua.
Yeah, Book of Yeshua.
Hebrew for Joshua, which is Jesus' name.
Yeah. So not Yahuah. This is one step before.
But language changes. Language changes. So he gave me a charge. So this is an angelic being. Do we want to start at the beginning?
Yeah. Tell me the story that's coming forward.
So the 14th day of August in the year 2024, at the first hour past midnight, a darkness opened above me, small as a hole in the sky. From it descended a being of form, yet without substance. His body glowed with a soft purple light. No garments adorned him, yet no shame nor flaw was revealed. That's interesting. His eyes were deep as indigo, shining like living glass, translucent and endless. His name was Aganabish. Aganabish? It's got a Hebrew ring to it, Aganabish. In his hands he bore a set of red plates, thick and lustrous, burnished copper. Through his lips didn't move. His voice entered my mind. It's like telekinesis. Calling me by my name of birth. So this must have been a name change. He spoke at the anniversary of the mother of Yeshua, Mary, and declared that I, though unseen in this generation, had been chosen for a sacred purpose, to bear a message born of suffering and to share it with the world. He told me that generations yet to come would know my name. That reminds me of Mary's encounter with Gabriel.
Oh yeah.
Like and then her Magnificat. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Hail Mary.
yeah. And people will remember you. So Aganabish. Okay, so Aganabish, he gave me a charge, 24 hours to record the message, after which it would be taken. Then he rose into darkness and vanished. 12 hours hence he returned, took the record and spoke again. 12 hours remained to publish it, and he ascended and I was left alone. Is he talking about this?
Yeah, he's talking about that.
12 hours.
12 hours. That's how long it took to write this record. And presumably this is sort of like a channeled, revealed text, right?
Okay.
If you sat down and wrote straight for 12 hours, I mean, what do you think? Is it possible?
With technology.
Who's technology, right?
I'm not sure if it's just me at a laptop.
It's a little interesting. I would think when we look at this, and this is just, I'm not a scientist. I think it's obvious this is AI.
Oh, yeah, and it came to pass.
Right.
And it came to pass.
Yeah.
Sure.
And it came to pass over and over.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
There are certain tells in a book like this.
Okay.
That opening story. So 12 hours.
12 hours.
In 2026, that immediately screams AI to me, right? Immediately.
Because of the time compression in the text.
I mean, how do you do that?
That's
Joseph Smith was known for the miracle of like producing the Book of Mormon in 3 months, right? And people talk about how, oh my gosh, how do you produce a book like that? It has to be supernatural.
Yeah.
Well, 12 hours. I mean, that's Trump and Joseph, right?
Yeah.
The other thing that's so interesting to me is, I mean, what do you think about the appearance of this angelic being?
So, yeah, that's strange to me. So,
if you had a parishioner came to you and said an angelic being came from darkness, that came above you.
I'm not aware of angelic beings that come from darkness. I'm not aware of angelic beings whose eyes are deep, endless indigo.
It's a little scary. Right?
It is a bit scary. Yeah.
Darkness.
Red plates.
Red plates. There's something about this that makes me think it's actually a play on the Merunhi visitation.
Okay.
And actually, I mean, we could take this seriously and say, oh, this person really wants to present themselves as a prophet or prophetess. But the other possibility is that they're deliberately presenting it as a sort of satanic inversion of Joseph's story.
Oh,
interesting. You know that it's a being with, how does it describe it?
Eyes were as deep as indigo, shining like living glass, translucent and endless.
I mean, that's kind of awesome, but for a sci-fi monster.
It's powerful imagery, but it would cause me to be frightened.
Right? What's the other? And angels do frighten you. That's a thing. And we could have, as you guys know, I hope, the ophanim of Ezekiel aren't angels.
Can I say there's one difference? Like when you see biblical encounters of angels to humans, and then even in like Joseph Smith's recordings of his encounters with Moroni, communication, and this is really important from like a Christian worldview, communication in the spoken word from the mouth is really important. It's how God creates the world. It's how angels pronounce revelation. Like the Son of God, Jesus, is described in John as the Word of God, like proceeding, right? So here, this is really interesting to me because there's communication between the editor or redactor, whomever this is,
Madison. Yeah, Madison Moore.
and this being, Aganovich that says, though his lips did not move, his voice entered my mind, calling me by the name of my birth. That's like telekinesis. It seems more ufological than, angelic or even. Yeah, that's really interesting.
I suppose we could have like a voice enter our heart. So maybe there's a idea there. What about its form? There's that line about its form that throws me off.
The form of the being itself. It descended a being of form yet without substance.
Yet without substance. Yeah, there's form without substance, which would be another way of saying without a body, right?
Yeah.
Now, Latter-day Saint angels typically have bodies.
That's kind of the thing,
right? It's a big deal for us. And so the absence of body could be a just man made perfect, who's supposed to be like glorious, right? Like the body contains glorious people. And so this is a being without a body that's coming through darkness. I think this is very potentially a deliberate representation of a fallen angel. Maybe.
Yeah,
what did you find for us?
I found something that can actually be testable. Here in the 13th chapter, entitled "A Tree Grew in a Place." I don't know the narrative. I mean,
A tree grew in a place?
It says a tree grew in a place. So, in verse 12, Yeshua, so Jesus.
Jesus, okay.
Then Jesus saying in Aramaic, Shor Shai, Vathachthani, Abba, my roots are in thy love, Father. So, like, we could take what the Aramaic says here and reverse translate and see if at least the translation's correct. My question, though, is what's the original language that needs to translate the Aramaic, that needs to translate the Aramaic to the English, knowing that the reader would not know Aramaic to begin with? That's a tough one for me. There could be a rational reason, but I need to sit with that for a second.
Yeah. That's interesting, because we would know, for example, in a Greek writing, that sometimes they explain the meaning of Hebrew.
John does this
because it's
often.
a separate thing.
Right.
This is a little different, unless there's an editor that's sitting between these texts.
Well, remember the presentation of this text, though, direct from the being that came from darkness. So I don't know. That just struck me. Can I
borrow that? Yeah.
Fascinating, man.
You know what? That's your copy. I bought 3 because, get this, guys. The sealed Book of Mormon by Mauricio Berger that came out a few years ago was just this little paperback print-on-demand book, but they stopped selling them. And so the guys at Benchmark were selling them for $500 each for collectors, right? You just buy one collector. So I said, I got to get that. I'm going to buy multiples of the Book of Yeshua. It's still out because it's not available anymore. So this is your copy.
Holy cow. Thank you.
I'm proud to give that to you.
And it's on record.
I won't take it back.
Yeah.
And show the artwork in the back. This the person knows something about it.
This is fascinating. So, well, can I show one thing? Because this is what, so I'm novice to all this. You're the expert in the room. You just let me hang out in the library. But I noticed this.
Show that to him.
I noticed this symbol. I saw that in the Sacred Records app too, if I'm not familiar. I just thought that was interesting. But the artwork,
so they're meant to be the same
part of
the Marvel universe, right? You'd have the same players that play.
I see. Yeah. Well, here's some really, I don't know how to describe the artwork here. It is art as far as it's depicting images and it's in color. But if you can't
almost
see
a 19th century Bible version of Bible.
For sure. Yeah. No, that's a really good point. But you can't see it. Maybe you have to
put the images in.
Yeah. It's got AI vibes to it for sure.
It's like obvious AI. We can all spot that now.
Yeah. Like
even if Jesus has 5 fingers, we can still spot.
I think years ago this would have been probably going to blur it out. I think years ago, if this would have been it would have been like maybe harder to spot, but now we've been kind of trained. What is this?
I don't know what that is. Is that supposed to be a reformed Egyptian, maybe?
No, it's nothing like the characters.
I just noticed dots.
Oh,
the
the dots. Yeah, maybe that one kind of puts off a little bit. Yeah.
These are
Or the. I remember seeing that in the characters document. The
but it has
hash
the
marks, but it's got
circle above
the hash
it.
loop around it.
Ancient characters copied from front of the first tablet.
So wait, are you saying that they got this and then had to translate it in 12 hours, or did they just receive this translation and they saw this too? Right, because that makes it
For translation?
are we more challenging
Uh,
to do in 12 hours?
being charged 24 hours to record the message after which it would be taken. So he needs the plates because he's going to record the message.
Like copy it down because you got 12 hours and when I come back, they're mine again.
To bear a message. I imagine, I mean, it's possible this is channeled, right? Like the text. It doesn't mention like a visual component, like a, all right, here we go. In the hours that followed, my hand moved with astonishing swiftness. Did you read this part?
No, I didn't.
No. I relayed to my mother that 200 pages had been written in what seemed an impossible span. It was not translation I performed. Rather, the words flowed directly from the record into my mind in a tongue akin to Ojibwe. Understood without effort. I knew not rest. Every moment was given to the sacred task. Time passed as though in minutes. Time always passes as in minutes. Yeah. At last, in the early hours of August 15th, the work was complete and the message was made public. I marked the hour well. It was the anniversary of the death of the mother of Yeshua, as Adonabeth had spoken. Okay. So it sounds like it's not, some people would say Joseph Smith doesn't depend on the records because he's looking through a stone, but there's some relationship between that records and this visual experience. In this case, he's looking at records that are the sort of impetus to his revelation, and he's hearing a tongue that's Ojibwe. It's safe to assume this person doesn't actually speak Ojibwe, just
Throwing it out there.
But here's a tongue Ojibwe, and that tongue functions as if it's, he says easily to understand, but obviously he's hearing the Ojibwe tongue, and then through the interpretation of tongues is producing this text. So it's sort of an automatic interpretation.
Yeah, it's understanding in a way that's incomprehensible to the person. So it's almost like the person is the medium rather than the text itself being the medium.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's signs of truth, signs of deceit. That sounds like it could be important for us.
I think that might be
I went too far. Mountains of the Turtle. The family comes from the Turtle Mountain Reservation, so this could be very close to Burrito, where it's written right about the sort of place they're at.
Okay. It's on the hill.
All right, let's see this. Medicine Man's Vision. Signs of truth and signs of deceit. And by the way, I might be doing B-roll of all this talk and trust right now. Yeah. On the morrow, he gathered not only the 12, but all who could stand in the cold and listen. He said, I set before you 2 roads, crooked and straight, 2 signs, noise and fruit.
Noise and fruit?
Maybe that
isn't like an audible symbol and a tactile symbol.
Yeah. Maybe there's a draw. Maybe it's a sign.
Okay.
The crooked boasteth of speed, the straight endureth to bread. Noise bloweth like chaff, fruit endureth as store for winter. Therefore prove all teachers by widows fed, rooms warmed. He taught signs of the straight trail, hands washed before prayer, not as pride, but as courtesy to God. Let's get this deceit.
Charity and cleanliness. That with signs of a true teacher according to that
He taught
text.
them a closing chant. Is it going to even tell us the sign of deceit? Call the maker by a name you know not, yet he knoweth you by name from the womb. Call the maker by a name you know not.
Bro, there is a text in the records of Moroni where Yeshua tells Moroni, I don't care what people call me, but the name doesn't matter as long as they're like sincere and seeking after me. Do you think there's a connection?
Maybe. It would be interesting to know when this released on Amazon in relationship to the actual sacred record.
Yeah.
One possibility, and I'm not putting this forth, is that the author of this is the author of all of it. I don't think that's the case, but
yeah, I'd need to sit with that text to.
all right, we're gonna give this to you.
Did you get to this? Get to the deceit?
No, I don't think it's there. Lehi is also another name that shows up. What, or is it Lehi? Is it? David is pronouncing Lehi in certain ways than Lehi.
Okay.
And as if it's the indigenized version of the name.
Lehi, isn't that closer to the Hebrew?
Maybe it is. Yeah. The council in heaven we have.
Really?
We have a casting down. I mean, there's kind of cool stories. The great secret revealed and the quiet act. This is the problem, right?
Okay.
I love apocryphal scripture. I love apocryphal scripture, but I don't. How can I enjoy an AI apocryphal?
You can't. I don't.
Because I don't know if anyone actually generated their own deliberate thought into it.
Yeah.
Like, even if this was a channeled revelation from some guy who's in like a fugue state and like, is a sleeping prophet, like Edgar Casey. I still think that's interesting because it's coming through a conscience deliberately. But if a computer's producing it and no one's ever going to read it, then I become the only reader of the text. I'm the only interaction with this book that's ever existed.
Interesting.
I mean, I don't want to waste a lot of my time on that. I'm a folklorist. Yeah. I can't be the only folk.
Yeah.
It's an issue.
Yeah. No. I mean, I've got other issues with it, but that's one.
But you're willing to look at it. You're willing to
I do really want to look at this.
Its value is different. Like, it's an artifact that represents the possibility of a con is really the relevance of a text that I think is generated by AI.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't allow me to even do the cultural work. The work of studying the book of the law of the Lord. I don't believe it's a legitimate work of scripture, but it's generated as a work of scripture by an alleged prophet and by a people who take it seriously.
And gosh, you can't understand the story unless you understand the text. It just puts so much more context to what the people are doing and why they were doing it and how they were doing it. Yeah.
And otherwise, what I want, like the thing that would be worthwhile is like, what prompts go in to produce the AI text? Did someone at least sit down, barring that this really is an AI production,
Right.
Did someone sit down and say, make a Jesus narrative that sounds both indigenous and Book of Mormon-y? Well, that at least tells me something. If they say, this is the basic narrative, produce the story, then at least the narrative tells me something. If it's literally, here's the name, go.
Yeah. I wonder if you could take some of the text and put it in LLMs and say, what would be the prompts that would be required to produce a text like this? And then take those prompts into another LLM and then say, produce a text like this, and then see if, and then do like comparative analysis.
Are you willing to come back on? We do this?
Lord willing, I'll be back here next fall.
Let's do it. In a month, guys, I'm going to bring back my friend Kyle to the library. I actually think we have good rapport on this. I don't know. We might need to get him back to the library regularly.
There we go.
All right, guys, I'm going to pick up a copy of Kyle's book coming out here. Come back to the library next week. Kyle, it's good to have you here.
Thanks for having me.